The sun rode high over the plains like a cruel overseer, relentless and unblinking. Dust twisted in eddies across the cracked earth, carrying the tang of sweat and leather. Sam Calder's horse moved slow, hooves sinking into the dry soil with each careful step. He rode alone, the weight of his saddle heavy, not just with gear but with memory. He didn't speak much. He hadn't in years. There was little need. Words were a liability, and silence had kept him alive longer than guns ever had. Ahead, the town of Dry Creek sat in the shimmer of heat waves, a collection of wooden boards, hitching posts, and the occasional swaying sign. The wind rattled the windows of the general store, carrying with it the faint, sour odor of whiskey, sweat, and fear. Calder squinted, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over tired eyes. He didn't know why he'd come this far east, only that the trail under his boots had led him here. It was when he rounded the corner of the last bluff that he saw her. A girl, no older than 16, hung by her wrists from a gnarled cottonwood, the rope biting into her skin. Her dark hair clung to her face in sweat and dirt. A crude sign, nailed to the tree beside her, read, "White man don't forgive." Her body swayed slightly in the wind, and her eyes dark, alive, defiant even. In fear met his, Calder's horse neighed softly. The sound startled the girl, and she jerked upward, her wrists burning. He dismounted, boots crunching over stones, eyes scanning the street. Not a soul stirred. The townsfolk were either inside, peering through shutters, or gone entirely. The street smelled of dry rot and the faint, coppery tang of old blood. "Hey," he said quietly, not sure if he wanted her to hear him. "Easy." The girl's lips pressed together. She said nothing. Calder approached slowly, keeping his hands visible. His own hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the old ache in his shoulder, a scar from a gunfight he'd long wished to forget. "You hurt?" he asked. She tilted her head but didn't answer. There was pride in her gaze and a quiet fury that made Calder's chest tighten. He saw in her the same stubbornness he'd once carried long ago, before life had ground it down to muscle and bone and memory. The rope was rough, fraying in spots. Calder examined it with careful fingers, noting the knots and the tree's twisted bark. He could undo it, yes, but the problem wasn't just the rope, it was what came next. The town of Dry Creek was full of men who liked their rules simple. Gold in your pocket, control in your hand. And this girl was a debt unpaid, a possession to be sold. A moral equation with no easy answer. "You're Apache," he said finally. Almost to himself, her eyes flicked, sharp and wary. Calder hesitated. He'd known some of her people, fought alongside a few once. He knew the ways of fear, the ways of loss. He knew what it meant to have the world weigh on you and to hold nothing back because the world wouldn't forgive you if you did. He cut the rope. She fell to the ground, barely catching herself, a hiss escaping her teeth. Calder caught her arm, steadying her. Her hands were raw, bleeding, bruised. He said. "Quiet, you're safe." For now, her eyes narrowed. Not safe, she wanted to say not here, not ever. But she didn't speak. Calder led her into the shadow of the bluff, keeping to the alleys and crumbling fences. The town smelled of whiskey and iron. He could hear laughter somewhere down Main Street, a man cursing at a card game. Somewhere else, the whinny of horses. The girl followed, stiff-legged, eyes darting. "Name's Calder," he said. "Sam Calder, you?" She shook her head. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Not here." They found a small shack behind the old mercantile, boarded up but not abandoned. Calder pushed the door, checked inside. Dust thick as fog, a single cot sagging in the corner. He gestured for her to sit. She did, legs drawn close, eyes scanning the shadows. He didn't ask why she was hanging from a tree. He didn't need to. The signs of cruelty were enough. Men like the ones in Dry Creek didn't leave reasons written on the bark. They left scars and blood and fear. A week passed that felt like a month. Calder kept her hidden, taught her to move quietly, how to drink water without spilling it, how to avoid the rusted boards that would give them away. He spoke little, but when he did, it was measured. "Don't trust the men in this town," he said. "Not the sheriff. Not the banker. Not anyone with more teeth than heart?" The girl listened. She learned, she even laughed once, a quiet sound that startled him. For a moment, the shack felt like a home, but Dry Creek was patient. It waited. It had men who could smell fear, hunger, and opportunity. And Calder knew they'd come looking for her. It happened on the third night. The wind carried the soft creak of wagon wheels, the sharp bark of a dog, the whisper of boots over stone. Calder had just finished checking the horses. When he heard it, voices low and cruel, calling her name, he cursed under his breath. He grabbed his gun, checking the chamber twice. The girl moved beside him, silent as a shadow, eyes wide but steady. "They're coming," he said. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Calder had seen that look before. Danger didn't frighten her. Hatred did die. By the time the first wagon rattled into view, Calder was ready. The sheriff, a fat man with eyes like burnt coal, rode at the lead. Behind him, 2 other men, all guns drawn, all grins like knives. "You've got a choice, Calder," the sheriff called. "Hand her over and we forget the past. Don't, and it'll be worse for you." Calder didn't answer. He didn't flinch. The girl stepped forward and he placed a hand on her shoulder. She was still young, still alive in a way that demanded protection. "Back," he said softly. The first gunshot cracked, echoing off the bluff like a hammer. Calder rolled, firing. Twice, the smell of gunmetal filling the air. Horses reared, dirt flew. The girl ducked behind the shack, trembling yet unbroken. Calder's aim was steady, precise, deliberate. The fight didn't last long. 2 men down, the sheriff disarmed but cursing, and Calder stood in the heat, chest heaving, the sun beating down on his back. Silence fell over Dry Creek again, heavier than before. "You'll regret this," the sheriff spat, wiping blood from his lip. "Maybe," Calder said. His voice was flat, but there was weight in it. "But not today." He helped the girl to her feet. She leaned on him, small but solid, a living promise. Calder mounted his horse, and together they left Dry Creek behind, the dust swallowing their trail. For days they rode through desert and canyon, the heat baking their skin, the wind cutting through them like knives. Calder didn't talk much. The girl, whose name he still didn't know, didn't ask much. They moved by instinct, by necessity, by the quiet bond that formed between 2 people who had survived the worst of men and still held something like hope. One evening, as the sun sank low, painting the sky in blood and gold, the girl spoke. "Why'd you save me?" Calder paused, looking out over the ridges. The wind caught his hat, the brim dipping low. "Because no one else would," he said finally, "and someone has to." She studied him, waiting for more, but there was nothing more. Only the road. Ahead, only the wind and the silence. Weeks later they found a small settlement, not marked on any map, where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Calder left the girl there, with people who had hearts bigger than the towns they'd escaped. She watched him ride away, a shadow among the mesas, dust rising behind him. She never saw Calder again, but she carried him in the quiet of her mind, the man who came out of nowhere. Who didn't ask for thanks, who gave her the one thing the world had tried to steal. A chance to live, and somewhere, on a ridge far from Dry Creek, Calder rode alone, the wind in his hair, the sun on his back, carrying his own ghosts and the faintest, smallest flicker of something like peace. The world was cruel, always, but sometimes, just sometimes, it allowed for mercy.